Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here, and in association with my good friends at CDF Capital and Food for the Hungry, who's just doing incredible work around the globe. I'm excited for today's conversation with a pastor, writer, teacher, church planner, and actually a doctorate. I mean, they got a Ph.D. from TEDS. I'm talking about the one and only Sharon Hodde Miller. And I'll tell you in a second, we're going to have this conversation because I think the world of her preaching. She has this ability when it comes to taking the deepest truths and making them profoundly accessible. She has a PhD, but I feel like she never uses that in a way that makes me feel like I can't actually get after this text, but she really invites you with just her tone, with her command of preaching and her understanding of the context. It's fantastic. Now, for some of you, you've maybe read one of her books, like Free of Me, which is all about why life is better when it's not about you, or her most recent book that came out in 2019, it's entitled Nice. But for some of you, you've maybe never heard her preach. And after today, I guarantee you're going to want to go and start following Bright City Church based in North Carolina. So just so that you can get a sense of her sound, like we often do when we have preachers on this podcast, we should play a clip. And this is from a teach, one that I just thought the world of. It's entitled We Are Heirs. And it kind of played in the middle of March, I believe March 21st of this year. And she does an amazing job of unpacking the biblical perspective of inheritance. So listen to this, and then we'll welcome Sharon to the podcast.
God begins to share his inheritance now, in the present. And we see that language in verse 11 when Paul says, we have received this inheritance. There's this sense in which as heirs in Christ, we're already receiving some of the inheritance of peace, of joy, of power, of hope now. But at the same time, we all know it's not as simple as that, is it? It's not as simple as your parents writing you a check when you need it and you depositing it into the bank, because there's a sense in which even though God has declared this over us, that we have this available to us, we also struggle to claim it. We struggle to claim it. And that's another reason why I actually really like the illustration of the Princess Diaries. Is a big part of this movie is we see she finds out she is an heir and her life changes immediately. Immediately, she starts having a limo take her to school every day. Immediately, she's getting a makeover and she's getting access and she's getting power and she's getting privilege. But at the same time, this transition takes a while. Becoming an heir, picking up, wielding this power and this responsibility, it is a learning process for her. And sometimes she does it very badly. And you almost get the sense in verses 18 through 19 that Paul is acknowledging we claim our inheritance very badly too. That this is hard. It's something we have to learn. It's something we have to practice. In verses 18 through 19, he says, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened so that you may know what is the hope of his calling, what is the wealth of his glorious inheritance in the saints, and what is the immeasurable greatness of his power toward us who believe, according to the mighty working of his strength. He's acknowledging that even though this is available to them, there's this sense in which it's also kind of a slow process, that we need the guidance and the help of the Holy Spirit along the way, that just because God says you are free, you have peace, you can have joy, does not mean that we will never struggle again. It is a learning process. We are learning what it means to possess this inheritance.
Sharon Hodde Miller, thank you so much for joining us on the Crafting Character Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Now, this is a podcast that's, all about the craft of communication, but often times we've all seen people who have spent so much time on the craft, but not as much time on the character. And one of my dreams is to continue to highlight people that I have people who just will send me emails, or people who will reach out to and go, you have to start listening to this person, or you have to get to know this person. And a few years back, some people that I think the world of were just raving about you. And so I started to kind of follow you on Twitter, and I was like, man, she is literally winning Twitter. I feel like you, Rich Velotis, Beth Moore, Chuck DeGroot, these are like some of my favorite follows on Twitter. But truly, it was your teaching that I just found myself stepping back going, oh my goodness, this woman's got a gift, an absolute gift. So we just heard a little sample, a few minutes from this teach, We Are Heirs. Can maybe you give us a little of the kind of idea behind this teach, and then maybe we can chop it up a little bit from there?
Yeah. So when I was assigned to that particular passage, I, split the teaching with my husband. And so sometimes I don't know until a week or two out, like what I've been assigned to. And so when I realized that I was going to be speaking on what it means to be heirs in Christ, the question that arose in my mind that is often sort of my starting point is, why should I care about this?
Yes.
And I think that's actually a big part of my personality, where I'm an interesting blend of, I really love the deep things of faith. I love theology, but I don't want to live there. Like, I also like light things. I like fun things. I'm really into Disney World. Like, that tells you a lot about my personality. I like candy, like mental candy. And so I think that those two very different parts of my personality actually come together really well as a pastor and as a preacher, because I can look at, okay, what is the theology of this passage? Like, what is it saying? And then I think, okay, this is going to be boring. Like, how do I make this not boring? I'm an Enneagram 7. That might also be like a big part of it. Is like, how do I make this really interesting? How do I teach this in a way where people see that this profoundly is relevant to their lives? And so that was my starting point for that message and for a lot of my messages.
When you think about the idea of inheritance, and again, when you listen to this teach, what I really, really appreciated, you dropped 3 levels of kind of understanding biblical inheritance. And, you talked about it, a future inheritance. You talked about like a present inheritance. And then the clip that we just heard, that's all about almost like this inheritance where you receive these new spiritual genes. But you did exactly what you just showcased, because in the teach you're going, and that's like, you're dropping insights and helping me understand the context. And then you throw in a little Princess Diaries, and then, a little bit of a, Coming to America Part 2, but then just keep pushing. And I could feel like, again, the whole room is just able to go with you. That there's oftentimes, I think we lose people, but I feel like you don't compromise the depths, but you almost create just these mental exhales for people just to like laugh or like just breathe. But they're like, oh yeah, we're still going. But you did something in this teach that I did not see coming. And these are my favorite parts of a great message, is because I'm like, oh, she's about to land the plane. She's coming down. She's just talked about like spiritual gifts and like how we need to live this out. And then you flipped it and you talked about how there is a divide often when it comes to family inheritances, where often insecurities and brokenness begins to come up because we don't feel like we are going to be taken care of, or the way that you said it, provided for. I thought it was so genius. And then you almost led into these 2 profound theological application points that I just have not stopped being able to think about since I heard this teach and I went back and rewatched it a few weeks ago. I'm curious. Oftentimes people start with tension, and you started with it like basically, why should I care about this? But you in some ways saved the biggest tension for the end. And I just was so curious about that. Like I felt like it was genius, and it just was like a masterclass in preaching. And again, you should go back and go to Bright City Church if you're a listener and a student of communication, and just listen to this teach and watch how she turns it at the very end. But in your prep process, it made me curious. Why did you place the tension right there? It was the right move, in my opinion, but like, why there. If you remember March way back then.
Yeah. So I think there's two different reasons. So whenever I write a sermon, I don't know what other people's approaches are, but it's very almost mystical. Like I'm kind of, prayerful and really trying to listen to the Holy Spirit and seeing where it takes me. And that's also how I write is I'll have kind of an outline, but when I sit down to write a chapter, I don't always know where it's going to go. Like I'm sort of very open-handed with, okay, God, where are you going to take me in this? And so that's my approach. Like even with, I'll research and read commentaries, and the whole time I'm just listening for, where do you want me to go with this, God? And so my sermon writing process is a lot like that too. And so it wasn't necessarily where I thought I'm going to very intentionally, land this way. But also, so my Ph.D. was in educational studies. And so a big part of my education was learning theory. And one really simple nugget that I took from that is that people remember the first thing that they hear and the last thing that they hear. And what's in the middle, they tend to retain the least. And that has a lot of different applications in terms of even just the length of a sermon. Like the longer your sermon is, the less people are going to retain. If it's shorter, then, what's between the middle and the end or beginning and end, they'll just retain more. And so I really want to make sure with every message that where I start and where I land are going to be some of my strongest points, because that's what people are actually going to remember. And so that's a big part of it.
That's amazing. I've never thought about that, but that totally makes sense. I mean, that when you think about the power of a great bookend, just that introduction and that close. Are there other learning theories that maybe you came into your kind of PhD program with an assumption of, hey, no, this is 42 minutes is the optimal length, and then after going through the course, you're like, ooh, maybe 28 or something. Like other theories that just became so essential for how you and Ike, your husband, kind of arranged the setup of Bright City Church and the preaching.
Yeah. I mean, people's attention spans are only about 7 minutes long. And so, which is so short.
Yeah.
And so that's also why it's really important to break up your dense points with a story or something that can kind of wake people back up to what you're saying. Either that or what you're teaching just has to be like really, really good. So I'm always kind of doing that math where I'm like, okay, I haven't had a story in a while, or I haven't had anything to kind of break this up for people whose brains have drifted. And is the content that good?
Yeah, totally.
Keep going. So yeah, that has been really helpful. But otherwise, I mean, I think what I've been in a journey on, and that's why I was really honored that you invited me in the first place, because I've only really been preaching regularly for a few years. And so I feel very much at the beginning of the craft. And there's things that are just opening up to me about, I used to be much more of a linear teacher. And now I want it to be more artful, and I want to engage people's emotions. Emotion is a really powerful part of learning as well. And that takes time to, tap into people's emotions that way. And so a lot of that I'm just starting to figure out. And so even just having you share some of my teaching now is really humbling, because I am very aware of how I need to grow.
Well, I think one of the things that I appreciate most about the communicators I love to receive and listen and learn from is how thoughtful they are. And I think that's one of the pieces that I've appreciated the most about you and some of my other favorites. I'm curious, I mean, as a PhD, I want to say student, but you actually have your PhD. As an author, do you feel like you're preaching, you're more of a writer who communicates? Like you start from like the craft of writing and learning how to almost speak it, but you feel more comfortable kind of like writing a paper or writing a book? Or are you someone who's naturally the 7 in you that's like, no, I'm telling stories and I love to see how, and then I go back and I'm trying to capture it with pen and paper or computer and I don't know how you would say it, stuff that you would type, So how do you see that? Because again, your thoughtfulness is really, really unique.
Yeah, I think if you had asked me that question 3 years ago, I would have said I'm a writer who speaks. Okay. But that was before I was preaching regularly. And I thank my husband on a regular basis for pushing me to be the teaching pastor at our church, because based on where our lives were at, like I was finishing my second book. We just had our third child. We were launching a church and I wasn't sure I had the bandwidth for that. And it was very important to him that I have this teaching pastor role. And I'm so grateful because it's amazing to me that I've lived so much of my life not knowing that was something God created me to do. Yeah. And I love preaching. Like I had no idea, from start to finish, I feel like I meet God with every bit of it. And so now, and someone actually just asked me this the other day, they said, do you speak to write or write to speak? And I said, neither. They're actually kind of separate. They're both things that I really, really enjoy. Now, that said, I am a wordsmith. And so my sermons are heavily manuscripted. Like if you were looking at my manuscript, I follow it pretty closely because I really work on my language and want to, capture things in just the right way. And so I think my writing, does come through with my preaching, but at the same time, when I'm actually delivering that, I'm using kind of different muscles, if that makes sense.
Totally. Okay, explain this, because I think from the outside, I get the sense that, September 2018, you and Ike, your husband, planted Bright City Church. Mm-hmm. But how does the leadership work? How often is he preaching? How often are you preaching? Like, what is it? What does that look like? Just tell us a little bit more, because I think because you both have PhDs, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you guys are so gifted, and I just love even the way that he has kind of amplified your voice and saw the gift. And I find that to be so in both women and men, where somebody else saw the gift and goes, you need to be doing this, and for the kingdom's sake, but just give us a little background how Bright City Church is arranged and the roles and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my husband's the lead pastor. I have a teaching pastor role. Right now, that means I'm preaching once or twice a month. I would like, especially as my kids are getting older, during the pandemic, that was just bananas.
Yeah, right.
And I was probably teaching even less, but I'm hoping to actually preach even more, like as my kids get older and are in school, because our daughter's still in preschool, and so she's home a lot. So we have been figuring out what that dynamic looks like. It's actually been very challenging in some ways, because he is the lead pastor, but because we're married and because I'm on staff, people still come to me and will ask me questions or want me to sign off on things. And for a period of time, when we're just starting out and everything's very organic, that was okay. But as we've grown, that becomes really confusing for the other leaders in our church. And so I've had to intentionally step back. So there's been growing pains with that. There's also just the trickiness of being married and also leading a church together. And whenever anything church related comes up, I tend to put on my pastor hat and want to go into, co-labor teammate mode. And what I've been learning more and more is that 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, Ike is wanting me to be in wife mode and listen and not give him, answers. And so it has been hard. And even we co-teach every month or so. And that has been amazing, because I think our styles are very different. And I often say that I feel like when people see us teaching together, it's like this echo from the garden of, what God intended for man and wife, men and women. But the preparation process is very difficult because our preparation is so different and our styles are very different. And so, all of that has been tricky.
Yeah.
Like even in that message, I think I mentioned how, the spiritual genes thing, I ran it by Ike and he was like, I don't know about that. Cause he's just much more theologically, precise, and I'm a little more, creative with things.
Yeah. Well, it is fun to watch because, and I think it does showcase, the uniqueness, one, of the giftings, but then I think too, just how you two have fought to like really embody this model. And I think that's just a powerful piece. And it is interesting because, I think marriage is a mirror to our beauty and brokenness. It's like someone's reflecting back. But then I think also sometimes you're like, oh man, like this is like, I'll often say, I don't know if I've ever been this like explicit on the podcast about this, but I think since the beginning of ministry, because of the people that I served under, like all I ever was taught was egalitarian. Like that's what I was taught. So it was like a no-brainer, but I was an only child and I get married and I was like, yeah, totally egalitarian. But then something started to stir inside me and I realized I'm fully that, unless I want Sarah, my wife, to be able to do whatever she wants, but like, it just can't come at a cost at what I want to do. And I was like, all of a sudden we started like reflecting this, like year 4 and 5, and in concept or theory, I was one way, but then like this mark, I realized like, oh, I'm actually like living more like almost like it's all in service of me. So I just love like the fact that Ike was able to see your gifting, make space for that, even the team teach, even the stylistic differences. I just think, man, that is a gift for that greater triangle. Is that what they call it in Raleigh and Durham? Like that? Yeah, just that whole area. It's just I think what a gift and a model. And I think even for my wife and I, we're like, man, that's such a beautiful, beautiful picture. I'm curious, like from a message, like if I were to ask you to come speak and I gave you like a topic, walk us through just, what's kind of you asked that one question, like why should I even care about this? Which I love. From there, where do you go? Are there other clear next steps for you?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we primarily we do expository teaching. We don't do very many topical. I find topical series to be very difficult, actually. I feel kind of untethered from scripture. And I know that might sound weird because when you have a topic, you then have passages. But I find that when I'm picking the passages, it sort of lends itself to this inherent shallowness. I don't know why. Whereas if we're going through passages where I have to, like, for instance, I just gave a message on Ephesians 6 and the teaching slaves obey your masters, which I would not have picked to preach on that, Right. But it took us to this deep, beautiful place. And so that's my preference. But all that to say, I read tons and tons of commentaries, and I am constantly praying and asking God, where do you want me to go with this? And I go on walks. I'm just sort of like living in that space and seeing, where it takes me. But I think the question that is always sort of hanging over me is not just, why should I care about this, but what is beautiful about this?
Wow.
We are in, the Bible Belt where cultural Christianity is in the air. And because of that, actually, there's a ton of church hurt. Like there's a lot of cynicism. And I would imagine it's probably similar in like the Chicago area. But although you're in Phoenix, right? Is that right?
I'm in Phoenix. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of cynicism. We have a lot of people at our church who being there is sort of a risk. Like they're sort of taking a risk by coming back to church, and we feel the weight of that, of being really, that these are God's kids and we want to be really careful with them. And so what I really want to do is convince them of the beauty of God's word and the beauty of God's vision for them. And, especially when we're talking about things like sexual ethics, where there's been a lot of legalism and a lot of shame, and saying we want to hold on to what Scripture says, but not for the reasons that you were given, this better vision. And so I think that's also something that is driving how I teach. And then related to the church hurt is also just being very careful with the people. It feels a lot like we're in the mission field, even though we're in North Carolina, because people are they come in with a posture of like, convince me. And I'm not going to stand in front of them like I'm standing over them, convincing them. I'm actually starting below them in some ways. Yes. And so to have that humility and that sensitivity to, why they feel that way in the first place.
Well, you mentioned the word cynicism. And so I like, it triggered a memory of like a tweet that you had posted earlier this week. And I picked up my phone to find it. And you said, there's criticism that comes from cynicism and criticism that comes from hope, which just when I started to think about like, oh man, like there's just a way at which you look at things, not just why should I care, but what makes this beautiful? And hey, and with all this hurt, where can there be hope found or beauty found? So take me in, say you're plowing through some of your favorite commentaries. And I think I'm always trying to help people who are either new or who have been kind of preaching. What are you looking for? Like when you are like reading through those commentaries, and again, you're so well read, you're so intentional and thoughtful with your words. You carry the hurt and the pain and the ache of your people, and also the prophetic vision and the beauty of. Even in bright cities, like kind of vision, I keep seeing this word restored. Like there's a restoration heart that you all carry. But when you're going through that, is it a line? Is it an idea? Is it what's that mysterious? You use that mystical. What's that thing that you're chasing?
I think I'm either looking for something that inspires me or something that helps me to see the passage in a way that I've never seen it before. And that's why I I know you're getting together with Stanley Hauerwas soon, and he is just, a genius. And his commentary on Matthew is one that I would just read that book just to read it, because that's what he does. He always comes at it from a perspective that I've just never thought of before. And I love that. And I think that's part of what makes it interesting to me is I don't want to preach a message that isn't interesting to me.
Yes.
At the end of the day. And so I think, again, like it's very Enneagram 7, very, probably not like a little bit shallow, but I'm like, I want this to be interesting to me. And so that's what I'm always looking for.
Yeah. Well, but and oftentimes 7s are often known as people who are pain, almost struggle with being like sober of stimulation or like avoiding pain at all costs. But I do feel like you have an ability to wade well into the deeper streams. I mean, again, I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it in your preaching, how you and Ike have walked and led through just 2020. It's just been beautiful on so many fronts. That feels uncharacteristic of a 7 in a lot of ways, because it's, oftentimes just jumping from thing to thing. But man, there's a level of intentionality that you have. I'm curious. You mentioned like going on walks. What's as you've typically read through and maybe gone through and got some of that inspiration. Why the walks? Because I do that too. But like I'm curious. I'm just trying to learn from you. But like, what are you trying to do on those walks?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a big part of it is really physiological. Like exercise stimulates your brain. And so that was, especially when I was writing my first book, Free of Me, my kids were really little. I still can't believe I did this. This was terrible. Not in like a neglectful parent way, but just in how did I do this? I would go to the YMCA. I would put my kids in the childcare at the YMCA, and then I would sit at a table and write. And then occasionally I would take a break and I would just walk around the indoor track and think about it. And then I would take notes on my phone. And that was how I got some of my actually best ideas. There's something about moving your body that somehow like stimulates brain activity. And so honestly, it really is as simple as that, is I know this is going to wake me up and help me to have ideas that I might not have had before. So I've been doing that. Even like right now, I'm, in a cabin. That's why I think before we started recording, I said this, that's why it's so echoey, is because I'm in a cabin writing, and I'll just walk around the property and try and, figure things out, solve problems.
We're so similar, because I do the same exact thing. I write my messages, manuscript them on my phone in the notes page. And then and then oftentimes I'll have the Otter app, which is like transcribes. And so I'll speak it and then I'll like go back and listen to it as I'm walking and then write. But there is something for me that I feel unlocked and just almost like more free with the movement, than almost the restraint behind a computer. And I love that you found that for you. So now let's say you've gone for a walk. Is it kind of like you're honing down? If we take your "We Are Heirs" message, are you honing down to go, okay, I think these are the buckets or the chunks of the teach in the future inheritance, present inheritance. I got this like swirling idea of these spiritual genes, and then do you go to manuscript, or is it go back and forth of walking, writing, walking, writing?
Usually I'm actually surprisingly, the manuscripting comes somewhat late. Like I sort of get to a point where I really know like what I want it to say, like in my brain. And then when I start to, I sit down, it's not that I then write it all out. I still, in the writing, it sort of takes me places, but I've got to get like that core hook, like what is the main thing that I feel really excited about, and that I think is like the word that our people need to hear.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, I mean, I think again, the ability to make it so deep and so intentional and accessible, it comes through. But I think I would say it's like a marinating process of just that walking. It seems like it's like getting deep into your bones, or the walk is like getting out of your body, like the Jeremiah 20, like there's a fire in my bones, I think if I think back of your oldest is 8 years old.
Yeah. He's about to turn 9.
About to turn 9. Okay. So in the last 9 years, your family's done 2 PhDs.
Yeah.
You've released 2 books.
Well, actually, my husband also published his dissertation.
Publishes this. Okay, so we got this. You planted a church. COVID hits.
Yes.
You continued to teach outside. I mean, I think one of the things I had found from you way back was the sheworships.com. Like you were blogging regularly, tweeting. It seems like your family, just the 5 of you, there's just something special. It seems like you just love your local church. It just seems like you too. And again, the character piece for us is so important. How are you two choosing health and character? Like what does that look like when you've got 3 littles, a little church? I say little church, but I'm saying young church and 3 years old, less than 3 years old. Yeah. How are you, I guess, managing it all and doing so well?
I wouldn't say we're doing so well. I mean, if my husband was here, we responded to the pandemic very, very differently. Okay. So for me, going into the pandemic, my drumbeat for the church has always been discipleship. But going into the pandemic, I felt really frustrated about it because everyone was overscheduled. overcommitted, and nationwide, the average churchgoer goes to church once, maybe twice a month. And so I was watching this and I could see it before my eyes and just thinking, how do you disciple people? And you can just see that lack of discipleship, everywhere. And so I felt really frustrated by that. It's like I could see the goalpost, but there were so many obstacles to reach it. When the pandemic came, I felt like all the obstacles were removed and we had like a clear path to the goal, just like run the ball. That's how I felt. My husband felt like, where are the goalposts? Like, what happened to them? I don't even know where they are, that kind of thing. So we had like very different responses. And then the thing that my husband has actually been very, very open about, he's written a number of articles about it for Christianity Today, but his dad was an alcoholic, and his dad passed away quite a while ago now, but he thought he had worked through a lot of how that had impacted him, but the pandemic unearthed a lot. Yep. And so last summer, he just hit a wall. And we realized very quickly, you have to take a sabbatical right now, like immediately. And so last summer, he actually took 4 weeks off. And it was interesting because he had told one of his close friends who was at kind of a large church in the area, like, I'm taking a sabbatical. And his friend sort of raised his eyebrows a little bit because their senior pastor had never taken a sabbatical ever.
Right.
And he was kind of like, you're only a year and a half in, what's going on? And to me, that is the problem in a nutshell, is we are measuring pastors by their performance, by the product of their preaching. We're telling them, be healthy. We're telling them, practice spiritual disciplines, take care of yourself. But then we are submerging them in this toxic culture where you can literally be ranked on Yelp. And I think I've had a lot of, I'm kind of going off on like a rabbit trail right now, but I've really had a lot of questions about our model of church. And I've been really grateful for the pandemic decentralizing preaching, honestly, like for preaching the podcast. Yep. I actually think it's really unhealthy when we say this is the center, of everything else kind of revolves, and this makes or breaks your church. I think it is impossible to expect health from pastors. And so that's the funny thing for me. As much as I love preaching, I do not feel the burden that this makes or breaks our church.
Right.
In fact, I also don't even feel the burden that this is the most important part of our people's discipleship. I don't believe that at all. I think that it's, Jesus preached sermons, but the core of his discipleship was living with people. And so we've really, leaned into that. And I by really encouraging small groups, but I think that the more we are able to receive the gift of not having a Sunday-centric model of church, the healthier that we'll be. So that's a long answer.
No, I love that though. I think that's so true. And it's amazing is because we can use language that is, we care about formation, we care about discipleship, we care about character, but all of our metrics are driven by performance. Right. You know what I mean? So it's really, really tricky to say, oh, we're for this. You measure what you value, and I think that's been the hardest part when it comes to the local context is we are just, so for some congregations in some places, very, very clear about what they value and what they measure. And some are almost subconsciously saying, we value this, but we don't ever measure it. But we almost assume that you're doing this. But we're not going to talk about like that. We really value this, but this is what we truly measure. Yeah. And I think that you're so right. We are missing it. And I'm curious though for you, because again, I love the way you think about this. For you, what does discipling yourself look like? In that, like, so that, you can pastor well, that you can lead well, that you can partner well with your husband, that you can, be a great parent to your kids. But really, I think there's this incarnational ability that you were describing that Christ modeled again and again, whether with a child or, a soldier or a woman at the well, like just people. He was always overflowing with more. And if not, then he was like, I'm gonna get on a boat. But like he modeled this. What does that look like for you in practice and shape and form?
Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful for the message in my first book, Free of Me, and that message of self-forgetfulness, because that came out before we planted, about a year before we planted. And I'm really grateful for the spiritual work that went into that, because I felt like through that, God put to death a lot of the things that when you go into leading a church will put to death you. And so I was able to really hold a lot of those things lightly. And it's helped me to hold on to the joy of, ministry. So that dying to self, it's so much easier said than done, but just receiving all the things where God is clearly saying, this is killing you and I'm trying to take it out of you. And instead of holding on to it, just releasing it. And I think so much of the pandemic was that, where I feel like God was saying, hey, pastors, this is killing you. Like, this model of church is actually killing you in so many different ways. What if we put a pin in that and give you a different model? And I still see so many pastors who were fighting that tooth and nail. And I'm like, you're going to fight that all the way to just soul death. And so I think just receiving, the natural sanctification of, leading and ministering of this experience is a big thing. But I'll be honest, one thing that has been really hard for me is I don't know almost any women in my vicinity who are doing what I'm doing or even understand. And so I have really, when we announced we were launching a church, I had a line of men who were calling him and texting him and reaching out and saying, if you need anything, like, we can meet. He has a number of different guys that he meets with regularly. And there's no one, in my town. I have relationships with women in other parts of the country. What I really crave is someone who, lives in town, and so that is something that, especially for women who are listening, who are probably, resonating with that, and to say that I'm with you, I feel that. I also think that's why our work matters, is that I think the more that we do this, the more, we will be that for the women coming behind us. But I really, I would probably honestly be healthier if I had mentors around nearby. That's a huge gap in my discipleship right now.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I feel that, in the sense of it's easy for me to, I moved into Phoenix and, I was able to reach out to a bunch of different pastors and get connections. And there were a couple moments where I had some friends, some women of color who moved into a different city. And I just realized, like, oh, they're doing Zoom calls with people in different states. And I just was like, oh, that's got to feel so lonely in some ways. Because, I believe God calls us to places. Part of our calling is proximate to the pain and a city's ache and the strongholds, all that. But like, sometimes it's hard to kind of, if you're connecting with someone in Chicago or Phoenix, for you to understand what Durham or Raleigh is actually all about, And so to have people there, man, that's really, really good. And I'm also really, really grateful, because I think never before have we had this many examples of women who are teaching and preaching and leading and discipling and just doing amazing work. And hear me say this loud and clear, it's still not enough. And we need way more. But like, I also go, gosh, like, what my daughter will be able to hopefully see in the local church because of women like you, leaders like you. I hope that, fast forward a decade, there are people, and there's multiple people that you'll be able to reach out to.
And I think there will be. I actually feel confident of that. 10 years from now, I think church leadership is going to look different than it does now.
Okay, so that brings up, because I was going here. What do you see like in 5 years? What's, if I think about, isn't she beautiful? The church, the bride of Christ, like this beautiful, radiant vision. Where do you see it going in 5 to 10 years? I mean, everyone's got their take. Some people are trying to return it back to what it was. And, and this is a time to like create something, I think, or reclaim something. Yeah. What do you see it to be?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this specific topic just the other day. I really do think we are seeing the front edge of a huge shift in women in leadership in the church. And the reason I think that is, so we're in the South, and granted, Durham is very different from the rest of North Carolina. It's much more progressive. So it's not necessarily, a reflection of all of North Carolina, but still it is in the South.
Yep.
And almost everyone who's a Christian has spent some amount of time in the Southern Baptist church. And so when we were first recruiting for our church, and we would get to the part where we would say, and also Sharon is going to be preaching and she's going to have a pastor title. How do you feel about that? And especially when we were talking to someone that we knew had been raised Southern Baptist or was coming from a Southern Baptist background, I would always, get really nervous and think, what are they going to say? And we were shocked at how excited people were. Not once did anyone say that was a deal breaker. Like even people who, weren't necessarily on the same page, they were still open to it. And one man started weeping. He was so happy. And he said, finally. And it's not that there weren't any churches, especially the mainline Protestant churches, and then some of the Black churches and more Pentecostal churches, there are more women tend to be leading in those traditions. But in, the more evangelical ones, there are none in our area. And so it was amazing, because we thought we were sticking our necks out, and we thought we were kind of on this front edge. And what we discovered was God said, oh no, I'm on the front edge.
Yes.
Like I'm ahead of you. Yes. Like I've been making a way. You just said yes, but I'm doing all the work here, like changing people's hearts.
Yes.
And so, and people often ask me, because we are in the South, do I get a lot of pushback? And it could also be because I'm not the lead pastor, or I'm leading with my husband. I often joke that if people have an issue with me being a pastor, I tell them I'm just submitting to my husband. But yeah, I mean, it has been amazing to see that we are doing something that, we thought we were taking this big risk, and it wasn't at all. That it just showed me God's been preparing hearts. And I even see this with complementarian churches, where there is a softening of hearts towards the importance of advocating for women, even in your tradition, and which wasn't really there before. I think there was a language in complementarian churches of, yes, like women have value, but in terms of advocating for their gifts, that wasn't always there. And it is now in a lot of complementarian churches. Right. It is. And so I definitely see this wind of the Holy Spirit that is moving the whole church in a very particular direction. And I do think 10 years from now, because women now in my area, they never would have seen, young girls would not have seen a woman preaching. And now that is their reality. Like that is what is possible for them. So I do think 10 years from now, we'll see a lot more women leading.
Maybe so, Lord. Maybe so. I hope that is the case. And I think it's a beautiful reflection of the image of God when we have we have healthy representation of the gifts of God. So hey, Sharon, thank you. I just I feel like there's 1,000 more questions I want to ask you, and just so curious about. But I will tell you, I really, really enjoyed Free of Me. I thought that was a fantastic book. I think the title is so strong, and I just think the idea of it, and you even just alluded to one of my favorite parts of the book when you talk about self-forgetfulness. I think that is just as a 3 on the Enneagram, it's very, very hard for me to be free of me. And I am very good at centering me. And so it's just a really, really helpful word. And so, hey, if you've not picked up that book, please do. It's a fantastic, fantastic read. Where else can people find you?
Well, you mentioned my blog, which has actually laid somewhat dormant because,
Yes.
some things have to just be let go for a season. But I'm actually probably most active on Instagram or Twitter. And you can just find me on Instagram at Sharon H. Miller.
Awesome. And then Twitter. Twitter is a different handle though.
Yeah, it's someone else owns the Sharon H. Miller handle. So it's just S. Hodde Miller.
S. Hodde, Hodde Miller.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Or you can just Google or search Sharon Hodde Miller and it'll pull me up.
Yes, it's worth it. Follow that. It is worth it. It's worth it. Well, hey, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. And seriously, if there's ever ways that we can serve you and help you grow in the craft of communication, but always helping you have your character lead the way, please reach out. My email is steve@steveryancarter.com. And we've got some incredible cohorts that are beginning. The one, the only Nancy Beach is leading both women's and men's cohort together. And I'm excited because I think the world of Nancy. She is just an amazing, amazing leader, preacher, woman, and just a friend of mine. So super, super excited. You can learn more about that at craftingcharacter.org. But please, friends, share this. Go listen to Sharon and Ike's preaching at Bright City Church. Give them a follow. And with that, if there's ever any ways we can serve you, please, please, please reach out. But I hope you have a blessed week. Let's keep letting our character in Christ lead the way. Much love, everyone. Grace and peace.